able to be here with us today, that you can check this out by going to our website afterwards. I will also provide, or we will post, Alex will post for us, the slideshow to the website, the Learn24 website, so that this is accessible afterwards as well. We're going to save questions and answers until the end, so I'm going to move through this, and if you have any questions, jot them down and we'll open it up at the end, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, we're here for the overview of the new FY24 My After School DC RFA. Before we get into the weeds, I want to just point out that this is a new mayoral initiative for which the purpose is to ensure universal access to after-school programming for any youth enrolled and in an identified priority DC public or DC public charter school. And for those youth who are interested, of course, in participating in the after-school program at the listed priority schools. This is, of course, the launch year, and the current funding is to support a pilot designed to meet the need for OST services at the priority schools identified. So if we can successfully close the gaps in need for OST services at these schools, the hope is that there will be additional funding provided to expand to more schools in addition to these schools across the district in future years. So let's talk about the priority schools. The priority schools consist of both DCPS, DC Public Schools, and DC Public Charter Schools that were identified by an MADC work group that consisted of representatives from DCPS, DCPS Charter School Board, DC Action, Learn24 grantees and OST providers, and parents. The priority schools were identified using the criteria listed here, which is the total number of enrolled youth that are considered at risk, the ward location, and our priority wards are wards 4 through 8, current out-of-school time program wait list and or other demonstrated need as conveyed by school leadership, and that there was no known FY24 21st Century Community Learning Center grant application submissions to and or award from the Office of State Superintendent of Education. We really wanted to make sure that we weren't duplicating funding to the same schools. The priority school list posted in the RFA is made up of 26 schools, of which 17 are elementary schools and 9 middle schools, with approximately 65% DCPS schools and 35% charter school representation, and 65% being elementary schools and 35% middle schools. We do hope to expand to high schools in the future, but for this pilot program, we really focused on elementary and middle schools. Of course, that met the criteria. However, hot off the press, we do have an update. Hopefully some of you will find exciting that we have added 5 new priority schools to the list for a total of 31 priority schools. 3 of these schools met all the criteria to be a priority school, but were slated to potentially receive 21st Century grant funds. Following OSSI's announcement last week, we learned that these schools and or their partners did not receive the 21st Century funds, and so we have elected to add them to the list of priority schools. You can see here that these 3 additional priority schools are DCPS schools, Garfield, Brown Education Campus, and Walker Jones Education Campus. One being an elementary school, being Garfield, and then the 2 education campuses, Brown Education and Walker Jones. And then, I just want to make a quick note here for those that are K-8, as with any of the priority schools, the grade levels for the youth to be served should be decided with school leadership. But again, it's welcome to both the elementary and the middle level there. And then we have 2 additional charter schools listed here, Friendship Below Pierce and Friendship Southeast. I'm sorry, let me go back. Both of these schools are listed at the elementary level on the current or the initial priority list, but we should have extended that. It should have included the middle school. So that's just added here. So 2 additional as far as the middle school campuses at those 2 charter schools. And then again, Garfield Brown Education Campus and Walker Jones Education Campus. So who is eligible for an MADC grant? Applicants must fall within one of the 3 categories listed here. So first we have youth serving organizations with a 501c3 nonprofit status as determined by the IRS for a minimum of 2 years at the time of submission. So you've been a nonprofit for 2 years and who has an established partnership with at least one MADC priority school. Also eligible to apply are DC public schools identified as MADC priority schools that have an established partnership with at least one youth serving organization with a 501c3 status. And then DC public charter schools identified as MADC priority schools who may apply on behalf of themselves as they are nonprofit organizations, or they may partner with at least one other youth serving organization with a 501c3 status. So again, 501c3 organizations in partnership with DCPS schools in partnership with the 501c3 organization, or a DC public charter school on behalf of itself or in partnership with a 501c3 organization. So now let's talk a little bit more about the partnerships that are required. Again, to be clear, a partnership between a DCPS priority school and a 501c3 organization is required. So if you're either one of these entities, you have to be in partnership. For partnerships with DCPS public charter schools, they can partner with a 501c3. That's optional. But they can also apply on behalf of themselves. So they would not necessarily have to have a partnership. It is up to the school leadership there. So regardless of whether DCPS or charter school, any priority school and partnering 501c3 organization must work together to determine how to best meet the needs of the youth, families, and school communities. And so this includes collaboration on determining the following components of the grant application. And that's the youth to be served, including the total number of youth, the grade levels, and the targeted population. So for example, a school may really want to focus on their English learners for the MADC grant application. So again, that needs to be discussed and determined in collaboration between the priority school and the CBO or community-based organization nonprofit. Also the types of services. The type of after-school services includes whether it's a literacy program, STEM, academic focus, creative arts, social emotional, etc. So really need to identify based upon the youth that are being served, the type of services that those youth need at that school. And then the dosage model, the total days per week, hours, and times of services should be discussed between the school and the partnering organization. The details and the evidence of the collaboration between the priority schools and the partnering 501c3 organizations must be documented in a statement of commitment that has to be submitted with the grant application. The form can be found online at Learn24 website or in the Appendix 3 of the RFA or in the link here. And this is just a screenshot of the full form here. Here's the link. And then please note that in addition, the form must be completed separately for all 501c3 and priority school partnerships. So to be clear, a school, for example, can partner with multiple nonprofit organizations to provide services to perhaps different grade levels or different types of services. In addition, a 501c3 organization, out of school time provider, may also partner with multiple priority schools. So for any individual partnership between a school, a priority school, and the CBO, the out of school time provider, there has to be a separate statement of commitment form signed. And so let's just take a look real quick. I want to quickly point out a couple sections of the statement. It's general information in regards to who you're serving, the types of services, the schedule. Again, those areas that we want you to collaborate on for the application. But I just wanted to point out here the applicant organization and the partnering organization. The applicant organization is the organization who is going to be responsible ultimately for submitting the application, signing the grant agreement, managing the program, and meeting all Learn 24 grant compliance requirements. Okay. The partnering organization is either the priority school or a 501c3 that the applicant organization is partnering with to meet the requirements of the grant. So you have to decide between the two who is going to be the lead applicant and who is the partnering organization. The other thing I wanted to point out is at the end, the administrator for both the applicant organization and the partner organization must sign the form that needs to be submitted with the grant application. And this is here, this statement is of most important. So the signatory for the 501c3 is up to the organization, but it is usually the CEO or the executive director. Really, it's who you determine to be your signatories. Same with charter schools, it's typically the head of the school. But however, for any organization partnering with DCPS priority schools, the form must be submitted to the DCPS partnership team at the email that you can see here, dcps.partnerships@k12.dc.gov for their signature. Any statement of commitment form completed on behalf of a DCPS priority school that is not signed by the DCPS partnership team will not be accepted. So very important. Okay, so next are some important pieces of information that I want to point out because they really need to be considered in the application process and as early as possible as it relates to the feasibility of program implementation. So we're not required to apply. Let me be clear on what I'm saying. While not required to apply for an MADC grant, any 501c3 organization partnering with a priority school must have the following in place before any MADC programming can begin. For DCPS, this includes a signed memorandum of agreement with DCPS. Please note that the MOA process can take upwards of 90 days. You will also need a fully executed facilities use agreement and valid DCPS clearances for all program staff and volunteers working with DCPS students. So again, these three things are needed to work in a DCPS school. If you already work in DCPS schools, you're good to go. But if you do not currently work in a DCPS school, these are things to consider. And then, of course, the priority school will be considering because as this program is due to roll out in the spring, we have to think about the timeline and the feasibility of getting these things in place before a program can be implemented within the school. Now, for the DC public charter schools, 501c3 organizations partnering with partnering with a charter school are subject to the individual requirements of the local education agency, including legal review prior to implementation of any MADC programming. So it's just important that any organizations partnering with a charter school have the conversations with the LEA during the initial collaboration phase, because each LEA exists as a separate agency that is unique to each charter school system. And so you will, or agency. And so please make sure that you're having that conversation up front so that you know if the grant is received, what would need to be in place prior to implementation. So now let's talk about the grant cycle. The FY24 MADC grants will be available for this fiscal year, starting with the spring semester or the beginning of the third quarter, based on the DCPS calendar. That can vary a little bit. That calendar varies across the charter schools, but based upon the DCPS calendar, that begins Monday, January 29th, 2024. This grant is subject to 2 additional continuation years, of course, as always, pending available funds approved by DC Council. So as far as the program period or the program implementation date range, MADC is for school year only. And as the title implies, it is for after-school programming. After-school programming that takes place during the school year requires that services take place between October 1 of the year and June 30th. Again, the school year, roughly. And this is for after-school programming. It will begin January 29th for FY24. That's the earliest date. We'll probably, there will be a little bit of a period of time, maybe through mid-February for startup, but we're looking at launching the program as soon as January 29th for FY24, and that will run through June 30th of 2024. And then we'll be funded October 1 for the continuation year, which is the beginning of our fiscal year, through June 30th for each subsequent year. Now, while program period or program implementation ends June 30th, again, the end of the school year, MADC grant period will run through September 30th, allowing for the use of funds for planning and school year program startup for the fall. Okay, so usually our school year grants end program period June 30th, grant period July 30th, allowing for a month of closeout. We are extending the grant period through September 30th so that you can use the funding to plan over the summer and prepare for the fall launch of the continuation year. Again, pending funding. So now let's talk real quick about the youth to be served. Organizations must serve a minimum of 20 unduplicated youth by the end of the program period, with the exception of small nonprofits who may apply. That minimum number is 15. However, while this is the minimum, the expectation is that the MADC grantees will be helping to close the gap in the available priority schools. In available services, I'm sorry, I should say, to close the gap in available out-of-school time services at the priority schools. So again, it is important to work with the priority school administration to determine the number of youth to be served. This is why we didn't really want to do like a 50 minimum, because it depends on what the need is at the school. We did require a minimum of 20 or 15 for small nonprofits, but it really should be based on the number on a wait list or a determined need as demonstrated by the school leadership at those priority schools. And let me go back and say real quick here, as I indicated before, a school could partner with multiple nonprofits. So if they have 100 kids on the list, and let's just say hypothetically they're a K-8 school, or let's just even say they're elementary, and they want to partner with one organization to serve their K-2 and roughly serve the other half, third through fifth, 50 and 50. With another organization, that's completely fine. So you would not be required to meet the full gap there. The point is the total number of youth to be served should really be determined with the school leadership based upon the need. In addition, as with the FY24 OST RFA, applicants will receive priority points based on the percentage of proposed youth they intend to serve within each grant period that meet the targeted populations: economically disadvantaged, homeless, in foster care, a high school student that is 1 year older or more than the expected age for the grade that he or she is enrolled in, has a disability, is an English learner, LGBTIQA+ member, or residing in wards 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8. I want to stop here and just quickly, as I think our existing grantees know, we're working with DCPS and OSSI to identify the actual indicators here for the youth in most cases, all but one, which is the LGBTIQA plus. So we will be able to confirm, like, if you say you're serving 50% of your youth are English learners. You really need to, of course, you don't know when you're doing the application who is going to apply, but this is where the focus really needs to be in your application recruitment outreach process. And of course, in collaboration with the school who will be helping to identify those youth. For LGBTIQA plus youth, this is in place for those organizations that may want to develop a program or with the school, or the school really wants to focus in on serving those youth. But there is not a way, of course, other than self-disclosure. So that one, there's a little more flexibility in how we manage, but is in place for those organizations that really are geared at supporting that particular population to meet their specific needs. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, let's talk about dosage. Organizations providing after-school services to youth through MADC must offer consistent and ongoing programming designed to enroll the same group of youth at the proposed priority schools, utilizing one of the dosage models defined here, which are consistent with the FY24 OST RFA. And that's the continuous model, which is programming that occurs during the school calendar year for a minimum of 3 days per week for at least 8 hours per week for a minimum of 25 weeks. Of course, that's for the full school year. It won't be 25 weeks in the spring, but roughly half that. And then for the series, that's a programming scheduled across 3 or more program blocks during the school year, with each series including a minimum of 6 or more continuous weeks for at least 6 hours per week. Okay. Now, priority points are also being offered for those that provide what we call optimal dosage, and that's based on nationally known best practices. And the programming that is considered the optimal dosage is those that serve 5 days per week, no less than 2.5 hours per day for a minimum of 25 weeks. And that is across both kindergarten through 5th and 6th through 8th grade, both elementary and middle school level, that you will receive 4 points for the optimal dosage. And I pointed out here for the spring, that's 156 hours. And then for continuation years, that would be 312 minimum hours. Now we've had the question in regards to middle schools, and we know that middle schools aren't as likely. The programs that are that we currently support aren't as likely to serve youth 5 days a week. There are still the priority points for those that do. However, keep this in mind. If the applicants are all proposing 3 or more, you're going to be competitive against each other. And so you won't be necessarily ineligible or not receiving the highest points because you're not serving 5 days a week. If the environment, the landscape of OST providers is really to provide 3 days per week. So there is still competitiveness for those programs that propose to serve 3 days a week. And in addition to that, we are not requiring that the programs that are serving elementary versus middle school students compete against each other. There will be funds earmarked for middle school programming. So again, if all the elementary school programs are serving 5 days a week and getting those priority points, and the majority of middle school programs are serving 3 days per week, you will not be kicked out of the competition, or not receive it's a little harsh way to say it, but you won't fall below the highest point threshold because you're competing against elementary schools. I hope that's clear. If not, ask at the end and I'll make sure that I reiterate. So now that is established, let's talk a little bit about the funding amounts to be awarded. MADC has available $3.1 million for the grant competition. Organizations may request up to $2,500 per student served. The maximum grant award is $999,999, less any existing OST grant award amount that has been issued for FY24. So an example is if you received an FY24 OST grant award of $250,000, you subtract that from the $999, and that leaves $749,000 that you can apply for. But remember that this is based on the total youth that you serve at $2,500 per student, which means you would need to propose to serve 300 youth. 300 youth at $2,500 each would get you to that ceiling of $749,000 to be served. This is, for example, I don't know that there will be a school that has 300 youth on their wait list, but this is, for example, where you can serve multiple schools and apply for one application to serve multiple schools to close those gaps across the schools, and therefore ask for additional funds to do so. Funding allocations will remain constant across FY25 and FY26 school years, again, pending council funding. So basically, you will receive more kind of per pupil, if you will, for the period to be served for this spring. The $2,500 for third and fourth quarter will then be spread across the full year for FY25 and FY26. So there's additional funding to allow for startup, materials, equipment, and again, the planning across the summer period prior to the next full year. FY24 MADC grant application attachments must all be submitted through CitySpan at the Learn24RFACityspan.com website. If you are a current grantee, you are familiar with this as we launched this in FY24. It is the same link. And as with before, you have to have an account separate in CitySpan RFA portal. This is different than the CitySpan grant management account that if you're a previous year grantee, you have a account and the data management system once you're a grantee. The RFA portal requires a different account. However, if you have already went in there and whether you submitted for FY24 or not, if you established that account, if you put any information in there, if you uploaded forms, all of that will be in there when you go in and use the username and the user and password, the credentials that you have for this RFA website. You'll go in there, you will see your organization name, you will see all of your uploads, you will see all your agency information. So you will not have to re-enter any of that, except be sure to check if your if your business license, for example, expires before the timeline, you have a new one. Some have expired since the submission to FY24, and we're reaching out to you about that. But say it's going to expire November 30th, 2023. I was going to say October 31, but then you will want to go in and get your new one and get that updated, a new one updated to the system. But generally, all that information, all those forms will be there for you, okay? In addition, the application is very similar to the OST, the FY24 OST. And so you will be able to use your FY24 OST application, if submitted, to complete your MADC application. There are some distinctions in the questions, especially as it relates to the priority school versus the community that's being served. I would take a look at each question and just make sure that you're answering it and tweak it as needed. There are a couple additional questions, so look out for those. those, but generally it is very similar so that you can use your previous application if you submitted for FY24 to complete the MADC application. If you don't have a copy, you're able to access it in the portal. It's your addendum to your grant agreement. Otherwise, you can reach out to your grant management specialist and we'd be happy to send you the PDF of your application that was submitted. Okay, so one other point. Remember, as with FY24 OST, you will receive a confirmation once the application is received by the deadline. If you do not receive a confirmation, sometimes, internet systems can be funny, something doesn't go through, please email us immediately if you do not receive a confirmation upon submission. Any questions you have should be sent to that same RFA OST 24 at DC.gov that was set up for FY24 OST RFA. And the questions are being answered publicly, not privately, but privately we send the response and then we also publicly post the response in the Q&A. There are no individual consultations taking place during the open RFA. Any questions must be posted through the email so that we can respond there and then copy and paste the question and answer into the Q&A so that everyone has the same information. Okay. All right, so there have been some questions already posed and posted in that Q&A. And again, you can find that on the Learn24 website. So if you haven't, be sure to check that out. We are also updating, I believe Alex has already updated the new RFA and priority school list to include those additional schools, and CitySpan was in the process of doing that today as well. So that should be complete so that when you go in there and complete the application, those additional schools that we added are included. All right. With that, one last thing, timeline here. Wednesday, November 8th is the last day that the questions may be submitted, and Friday, November 10th, that's next Friday, not this Friday, but the next will be the last day that answers will be published. So make sure you get a chance to go through the RFA and post any questions that you have, that you still have after today's session, and send those through that RFA email address. The grant applications are due Monday the 4th at 5 p.m. That provides 6 weeks for completion. Please do not wait until 5 p.m. the day of. In fact, please don't wait until the day of because as we know, systems sometimes crash with lots of activity and we just do not want folks to be in that situation. December 5th through 22nd, there will be grant reviews, and if there's any questions, clarification needed on the materials that were submitted, we'll reach out to you during that time, and then awards are due to be announced in early January so that you have a month to plan for startup. All right, with that, I want to open it up to Q&A. Let me go back to the screen so I can see here if anyone has their hands raised. You can raise your hands and or just come off mute and let me know what questions you have. We do have Abigail Cohen from DCPS Partnerships office here. So if you have questions as it relates to the partnership with the DCPS Priority School, she can hopefully help me with those. But yes, please just raise your hand and I'm going to see here who we have. I do see some hands. Stephanie, please come off mute and ask your question.
Hey, yes, this is Stephanie with Reading Partners. My question was just in terms of the dosage. So is it a minimum of 3 days a week, 8 hours a week per student, or just that the program is running? And like if you serve, like the students get 2 hours a week, but your program is running throughout the week, but they are only getting, I just was curious about the dosage.
Because Reading Partners is a one-on-one.
Correct. And so we're open. I think that the hours during the week is not a problem for OST programming, but the students themselves receive like 2:45 or 1 hour sessions a week.
Yeah, you know what? Let me follow up with you. I am listing that question because it may be that we do add a continuation. I'm sorry, that we add it was called a continuation one-on-one dosage, I think, in the FY24 OST, and that may be the best way to do it, is just to include that as an additional dosage for our one-on-one programs. And sorry, I did not, I was thinking, yeah, that should have been included. So I will follow up with you directly and will post it in the Q&A.
Great, thank you so much.
Yep. All right, next question, Kelsey Norton.
Hi, thank you. I was wondering, do the students who are served need to be unduplicated from the OST grant, or can there be overlap?
They need to be unduplicated. Thank you for that question.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So just to be clear there, we can't, two grant programs cannot fund the same youth to be served. So if you are already serving 50 kids at a priority school, the purpose of this grant is to expand your services to perhaps serve an additional 30 on a wait list and therefore eliminate the gap in need there.
Thank you.
Okay, of course. David.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. I was just wondering, with the shortened year one implementation period, if you're following the series model, is there a number of cohorts that you have to address? Is it one cohort in the sort of remaining 20 weeks of school, two cohorts? I just was wondering how you're adjusting to the shortened calendar. I understand that the series model and sort of continuation years would be clearly 3 cohorts, but I just wanted to check where it stood.
Yeah, another great question. Thank you. Let me we do have the minimum hours, I think, as long as, and I'll respond. Again, all of the questions being asked here, I'm going to write a written response and include in a Q&A that can be accessed on the website. So I will provide a response, a formal response, but informally, I believe what we would say is, as long as you're meeting those minimum hours, which is half, basically, and it was on one of the slides, 100 and so many hours, that you can determine the series. It can be 3 smaller series, maybe not 6 weeks each. It can be 1 series, as long as it's meeting the minimum hours for the year, for the half of the year, I would say. Does that make sense, David, or do you need more clarification?
A little bit more clarity of, if I saw it, it was, you're aiming for 156 hours for priority points in the series model, but it also listed 108 hours over 3 cohorts over the course of a year. Are we assuming then it would be 54 hours of programming for the half a year remaining? Okay.
Yes, exactly. So 54, and thank you so much. That's an intricacy that I need to flush out in the grant application a little further. So thank you for the question. It would be 54 minimum for the spring, and for the priority points, it would be 156.
Okay, great. Can I ask one more question while I have you? And it will be very quick.
Yes.
There's several schools on the list, like a school like Perry Street Prep, that's a K-12 school. Can we partner, like they're listed as an elementary school, but could they be a potential partner either in middle school or high school, given that they're listed as one of the priority schools?
They are listed, they cannot be for high school. I believe they're listed for their elementary school. I can check back. Let me check with Perry Street. There were the 2 friendship schools that were added at the middle school level, right? So let me check with Perry Street. I just need to make sure what their focus was. Or where their need was, and when it was, we worked with the schools to determine the identified need. If it's just at the elementary level, then it would remain at the elementary level, but I'll double check with them. And if middle school is an area where they also have demonstrated need, we can look to add that to the priority list as well.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Of course. Okay, the next question is Kimberly Smith.
Yes, I have two very quick questions.
Okay.
First, do you have a recommended ratio of staff to students for the after-school program?
1 to 15.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is, well, is more of a clarification. I just want to make sure I understand correctly. There are a number of documents that need to be submitted to DCPS, the assigned memorandum, the fully executed facilities use agreement, and the clearances for all program and staff. I just want to be sure that I understand those do not need to be submitted until after we have received confirmation of whether or not we awarded the grant. Is that correct?
That is correct. They would need to be, so the MOA and the facilities agreement would need to be in place before the program is implemented. So between, beginning of January when the award is announced, if you were to receive the award, you would need to get immediately working with the DC Public Schools. And again, that's Abby's office, Abby Cohen. And let me put, Abby, are you will you put in the chat if you're able to your email address, the DC partnerships. It's also in the slide, but working with her office to make sure that those things are in place before implementation. However, I do, just want to caution, like priority schools may or may not be open to that just because it could take 90 days for an MOA to be in place. So I just want to caution you as you talk to priority schools, if you don't already have those in place, they may be looking, to be able to roll out the program much quicker in the spring. And so again, just cautioning that would we would heed to the priority school and making that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Okay, does not. All right, next question, John Campbell. What you got, John?
Hey, Shada. I have a question related to the budget. And for that year one piece, it looks like the allocation is up to $2,500 per student. Is there any sort of proration that we need to worry about for year one, or is it the expectation that we would have the same budget for the 3 years of the grant and we would just have to spend everything in year one?
That's correct. Same amount, $2,500 per student for the first year, half a year to support startup, any equipment purchases, supplies, as well as I mentioned, it will continue, the grant period continues through September 30th, so it will allow you for planning and startup for the following, planning and prep over the summer for the following continuation year.
Great, thank you.
Of course. All right, who do we got next? Alicia Hopkins.
Good afternoon. So my question, our school is
I'm sorry, Talisha, I cannot hear you. There's a lot of static.
Oh no. So can you hear me?
I'll do my best.
Do you have a fan on or something?
Yeah, it kind of sounds like there's a fan, but. Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, go ahead and try, and I'll do my best to.
Okay. So if the school itself, I'm a charter school, 503C. Yes.
Yep.
So would we be able to create our own after-school programming to apply for the grant if we're not in partnership with another organization?
Yes.
Okay.
Charter schools are able to apply and. I'm sorry?
And so, like, I could have teachers as the
absolutely
folks who are working to support and do the endeavor after school.
Yep. Okay. You are able to apply and on your own without a partner, and provide the programming on your own without a partner. Since, again, for clarification, charter schools also are 501c3 organizations, and that's why they're able to apply and perform the work on their own.
Would I be able to find out, because we have a new leadership team, if our school ever participated before, or any context around that to see like our previous applications, because we're all new leaders to the school.
Talisha, what school is it?
Hope Community.
I do not believe that we have a previous application, but I'll take a look.
It used to be Imagine Hope. Imagine Hope Community Tulsa campus. So that was the old, yeah.
Okay. I will take a look and let you know. If you can put your email in the chat so that I can respond to you. Okay. Was that it? Great, good. I'm glad we were able to get that. And I was able to understand and respond. Mazzy.
Thank you. I had a fairly simple question. We are currently a year-round grantee. Yes. And so we were awarded in August, but don't expect our first payment until February. Do you know when you're planning to do the disbursement of funding for after school if you're doing announcements in January?
Good question. So there is always a delay in regards to the grant agreement first being executed. And in order for a grant agreement to be executed, we have to have your certificate of insurance approved by the Office of Risk Management. Now, if you're already a current grantee and we have that certificate of insurance for the year, there should not be an issue with that. That should move, quickly. However, we then have to submit a requisition once the grant application is executed, and the Office of the Chief of Financial Officer for DC Gov then has to issue the PO number. Once you have the PO number, and that's outside of our office, so we don't have as much control and can't really provide a timeline on that. But really, that's the only two delays would be executing the grant agreement and then getting that. Once that's done, the PO number, we initiate it, and once they issue it, you can submit a invoice. And we have been working to turn around invoices as quickly as possible, thanks to our resource allocation analyst, who is doing a fabulous job. But within 30 days of the actual submission into DIFs, you will receive your first payment. So I know that's a long-winded way of saying what I know you're probably looking for, like an exact, time frame period, but it really is dependent upon how long it takes to get the grant agreement executed, which we try to turn around very quickly, and having it in CitySpan allows us to do that because everything rolls over. You're able to review, update if needed, and submit, and then the same day we initiate the process for a PO, and then it just is how long it takes for the Chief Financial Officer's office to get that issued.
And the last question is do you know why it takes 90 days for the approval for the use of the building? That seems kind of long.
Abby, do you have any feedback on, and that's not use of the building, that's MOA process with DCPS can take up to 90 days. Do you know why it takes up to 90 days to get an MOA in place?
Yeah, typically the part of the process that takes the longest is the insurance part. So the DC Office of Risk Management issues insurance requirements, and then the partners have to provide a certificate of insurance that demonstrates that you have all the requirements. And typically there's a fair amount of back and forth between partners and ORM. It takes some time to get those initial requirements back from the agency. So that is typically where the most of the time gets eaten up. If we get the insurance requirements back quickly and you happen to have everything in place, or you can quickly acquire it, the process can go faster, but we just like to give you the most likely scenarios for planning purposes.
And Abby, can you confirm if they are a current, sorry, Matzi, this may be the question that you're asking, if they are a current Learn 24 grantee and ORM has approved their certificate of insurance for FY24, will they need to go through that again with DCPS for the MADC program, or will they be, will you be able to grandfather in the already approved ORM?
It's typically It typically depends when that insurance check was done by DCORM, but we tried not to duplicate when that's possible. And if you are an existing grantee who's in our schools, you should have an MOA already, and our MOAs are good for 5 years. So hopefully most folks fall into that category, but if not, feel free to reach out and I'm happy to let you know what you might need in order to get that squared away.
Thank you.
That was a version of what I was going to ask. It was
go
slightly
ahead.
different, which is if we don't know the partner school yet, are we able to go through that process without having a specific school selected yet? So we can initiate the process now, since you said it takes 3 months, even if we don't have a partner school confirmed yet?
Correct. Our MOAs are not school specific, and we structure them because we want to give partners, we structure them that way so that partners have flexibility, because we know that your location can change. So they're not school specific. And like I said, they're good for 5 years.
That's great information. Thank you. And thank you for that question. Okay. Next question, Princess. Oh, Princess, are you there? You might be on mute.
Good afternoon. My question has actually been answered. If I have further, I'll put them in writing. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Now we have Knox Phillips.
Thank you, Shanna. Question for you regarding program periods. I heard mention earlier of both the continuation period and the actual program period. When composing this narrative and everything supporting the proposal, is it based upon an implementation time period of January 29th through June 30th, 2024, with just an understanding and the expectation that there'll be 2 continuation years?
That is correct. As always, it is, as I mentioned, really dependent upon, sorry, our lights went off here. There we go. It is dependent upon City Council has to approve our budget every year. So we do not anticipate losing funds, but we have to just have that caveat in there. As long as the funds roll over from year to year, the amounts that are needed, the expectation is that there would be continuation funds for the full year for 25 and 26. But for FY24, you're writing the proposal for half of the year, starting January 29th through June 30th. You're correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, next question, Jerry Tracy.
Hello. Again, thanks for answering these questions.
Yeah, of course.
One that I don't think anybody's asked before. I see it in the chat, but I don't think there's an answer to it yet. And that is, there's a place in the RFA where it says that the program must be provided at the school. Does that mean physically that all these programs, they cannot be center-based even if we provide transportation from school and to home, or did it just mean for those school students?
Yeah, great question, and I'm glad you asked, because I should have known to call that out in the presentation. It has to take place at the school. The intent of my school after school DC is really to have school-based programming at the schools that the youth serve, that the youth attend, being served at the school that the youth attend.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Let's see, Summer.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted you just to go back before a question that I heard, and I just wanted some clarity. Is that if with a continuation, or excuse me, with a series model, if you were to have 20, let's say at the minimum 20 students, so in total 3 series, 60 students. Did you say that the series didn't all have to be the same amount of time? So one series could maybe be 10 weeks, the next 2 series could be 6 weeks, as long as it met the minimum required number of hours for the full year?
for the spring, and I'm gonna need to consult and just make sure we're thinking through this. And I don't want to respond on the whim. I'm thinking for the spring. Yes, I will respond in the Q&A to indicate what that will look like. It's really spelled out for a full school year, but what would that look like for a half a year? We will let you know that. But please note that if you're saying 20 youth per different series, you're actually only serving 20 youth. That needs to, like, you have to serve the same youth the full amount of time to count them, right? So even if you're only serving 20 kids at a time across the different series, you're only serving 20 youth. It's not 60 youth because you serve 20 different youth at 3 different times.
I guess though, part of that though, in a way, so I hear you and so I'm noting that. But I mean, as particularly with middle schoolers, if in fact we worked with 8th graders in the spring, there's no possibility of us working with them again come September, because now they're in high school.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's based upon grade level, not on the specific youth. But I just want to be clear that we expect those same. Let me rephrase this. The expectation is not that you would be serving 20 different youth 3 different times a year. It is that you would be serving the same youth 3 different times across the year. So maybe they have the way that the series model allows, because some of our programs do a literacy 6 weeks, and then they do creative arts for 6 weeks, right? And it's kind of has this gaps in between, a week or 2 off, and then they start the 6-week series. But the expectation is that you're serving the same youth because you're closing the gap, right? So you've got those 40 kids that need services, and you're serving them 40 times throughout the year. I mean, you're serving all 40 kids the same throughout the year. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied with all of this. Do you understand, or do I need to say it again?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. I just think that and I think that it still works for us, but I know that if you're sort of doing whether it's an intervention or an acceleration model, there's the possibility that a student sort of succeeds, you know what I mean? And then there's not a need necessarily for them to continue. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking. And if I'm thinking specifically of our program, it could be the possibility where in which a student continues on for the entire sort of 200 hours, but there may come to a point where it's, oh, you've succeeded in this and there isn't a need to necessarily continue on. But I do understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and so I think it's important to, again, just state, like, from this mayoral initiative, the focus, the intent is really providing for lack of better terminology, a full-time, comprehensive after-school program that closes the gap. If there are 50 kids on a waiting list whose families need after-school provision, that all of those students, all 50, are served Monday through Friday, every day after school. That is the hope with this. There's a little flexibility in that we don't require 5 days, we require only 3, but the priority points will really prioritize those, especially at the elementary level, that are serving 5 days per week, the same kids, closing that gap, meeting the need.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, of course. So, all right, Beth, yes.
I just had a quick follow-up on the previous question about the series. So
yes.
You indicated that if I were to propose a series and there are 20 in my first session, 20 different in my second session, 20 different kids in my third, then I could only claim I'm serving 20 kids.
Yes.
But if 20 is the minimum, would that be okay? What is
I'm sorry.
I'm not closing the gap with those 20
Correct.
kids. So then the first 20 that I serve in the first series now no longer has aftercare when I move to a different set. Is that the
correct.
issue?
Yeah,
okay.
if there's actually 60 kids that need service, they should be being served across the school year, not just 1/3 of the school year.
Okay, so that doesn't meet the spirit and intent of the RFA. So that's not a doable option, shall I say?
Yeah.
Okay.
For this particular RFA, correct.
And then a principal or a school saying, this is what we want, we would like sort of that series model that I just said. So we've got something in place for most of our kids, but not at these times. Could a school apply and sort of shape that a dosage series or not?
So what I would, yeah, I understand your question. I believe, like, you know, could the school say, well, this is all we want. So we really we want 20 different kids served, you know, each series. What I would say is, then they would need to have different partners that are serving those same kids during the other 2 series. Like they can do that, partner with, say, 3 different organizations, and then those kids, whether they're 20 or 100 that are unserved, would then be able to cycle through the 3 different series provided by, say, 3 different nonprofits.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Of course. Okay. Mark, do you mind helping me and calling out if there's any questions you see in the chat that maybe were not answered? Or if anybody has a question that has not been answered, feel free to come off at this time. And we are at 3 o'clock, so I understand if you want to drop off, I will stay on as long as folks have questions. And again, the answers will all be posted. Jen, I see your hand up.
Hi. Hi. Thank you. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What if we go to we talk with one of our school partners, and the principal, what they want is to have, let's say they have 20 kids they need programming for, or they have some number of kids and they want to have, I'm not even asking it right. Let's say
it's easy to get tripped up, right?
I know. Say the principal wants to have a number of partners, maybe 3 to 5 partners who can collectively provide enough programming for their school over the 5 days a week. Like the principal wants to build enough partners and programming that they can expose kids to the different kinds of programming through the week. But the way that it comes together doesn't equal 3 days or 5 days, or it doesn't even equal 3 days a week for the same kids. Like if that's what the school wants, is it different? Like I understand that that's not acceptable for an organization to apply to do, but I'm a little confused about the difference with how the school, like if the school's trying to put together a program, I imagine our school principals would say, well, we want everybody to have food prints. We want them all to be able to come once a week, and they're going to have other things that they can do on the other days of the week. Is that not acceptable here?
It is acceptable, but what it would require is the school to be the applicant. And then they would put in the full 5 days or 3 days or whatever that services are going to be provided. And then they would be partnering with the various organizations. Because the one application needs to be able to show the number of hours comprehensively that are being served. So if the school was the applicant, they could then subcontract or partner with various organizations, and there's really no limit to that. They could create their own program and have different folks coming in during all of the program
Shanna,
hours.
can I just make one point about that?
Yes, please.
From a holistic programming sense, makes a whole lot of sense. I just want to flag the same flag that Shanna made about the MOA process, which is that if a school is the primary applicant and they receive the funds, they then have to go through the procurement process to issue purchase orders to then pay the partners. And that is going to have a similar challenge, among other things, in terms of getting funds out the door and to partners in time for a January start. So I just really want folks to understand that there is a lot that will go into a school being the lead applicant. And for that late January start, completing the procurement process, I'm sure folks on the line have done that. That would be an extremely tight turnaround. So just wanted to, I don't want to be the fun police, but I want folks to know, to have that on their radar before you go too far down that road. And this is for DCPS specifically, not charter
exactly.
schools. For DCPS.
Now, if you want to work with priority charter schools that are willing to do that, and they are the applicant, and that is, for those organizations that do not provide comprehensive full-time services that really want to, push in a day or two a week, for example, working with charter schools may be the easier route there because you can subcontract. And there was actually even a question that was added to this application about in which you can receive points for, committing to subcontract with other providers, because that is the intent. We really want to also support organizations that have specialized services. And so if there is a way to do that, without you having to be the applicant and providing the full-time program, it would be by serving as a subcontractor to either a provider that is providing the comprehensive, and then they're subcontracting with you to come in 1 or 2 days a week, or a charter school that's running their own program and that would bring you in to do 1 or 2 days a week. So that's where we're trying to support our specialized programs who may not fit this model as well.
Okay. Abby, but with what you said, are you saying that you anticipate that the priority school principals are not going to be interested in building their own program, that's something they would either be discouraged from doing or not want to do?
I won't speak for principals and what they would ideally like to build out. I just want to make sure everybody knows that if the school is the grantee, that they will then have to go through DCPS procurement and budgeting processes, which can be very lengthy. So if the hope is to get programming running by the end of January, I think that that will be challenging. So as you approach your conversations with DCPS schools, and we're sharing the same reminders with school leaders, that just given the quick turnaround, that is a reality we want everybody to be aware of.
So schools, again, I'm sorry. I see you still talking, Abby, but I can't hear you. So either there's a delay or you're on mute.
Oh, no, I'm all done.
Okay, there's a delay because I was still seeing your mouth moving. Okay, great. So just to reiterate what in addition to what Abby was saying, was that the schools are receiving the same information, so they may not elect to be a priority school based upon that, but they may. I mean, Abby can't speak for them, we can't speak for them, but that is just something that they will also be aware that they will have to go through that process, so that we want everyone to be clear that there may be a delay there. And so that could impact how schools want to go about this process. Okay, I see Jennifer, did that answer your question, or do you have another question? I see your hand up.
I have a bunch of questions, but that's all I'm going to ask. Thank you so much.
Okay,
that's really
no
helpful.
problem. No problem. David, you have another question.
Yeah, I was just borrowing someone's question from the chat, but they were asking whether the budget at $2,500 a student, will that be prorated in year one? Like, should we plan on $1,250 per student because we're serving people from January 29th through the end of the year, or how will that part of the budget be handled given when the program is starting?
It will not be prorated. You will receive $2,500 for the spring, and then it will be at the same rate for the 2 consecutive years. So you will receive $2,500 to help with startup materials, equipment, and planning over the summer for the continuation years.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Summer, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure who had said it before, but I appreciated a question prior that talked about the spirit of the program and thinking about working hoping to work with the same students continuously, but also there being a possibility of not working with the same students just based on how the chips fall. And I think I wanted to clarify again, like if you are working with 8th graders if you're working with 8th graders, particularly to fill a gap in preparation for high school, which, middle schools, principals, and there's a huge need for it, right? So
right, of course.
If I have a program in which the chosen or priority group at whatever school it is 8th graders,
right?
Then it would be, and not to say that the other students couldn't be included, but if there was a group of 8th graders within that, in that amount of students, say 20, 30, then it's just inevitable, of course, that it's not going to be the same students. But then in the next full year, in the first half of the year, it'll be a new set of 8th graders, and there is potential for those 8th graders to then work again in the spring, or it to end up being essentially 3 different groups of 8th graders. And I guess that's what I'm saying, like, it doesn't seem to me that is outside of the spirit if that is in fact meeting the need for that particular group of students.
Okay, so if you are going to only be serving 8th graders, let's just say that so we can focus on 8th graders. And you're going to serve 40 8th graders in the spring.
Yes.
Those are going to be the same 40 8th graders from January 29th to June 30th. Through that period of time, as long as you're meeting the minimum hours, right?
Yes, yep.
Then come FY25, you're going to serve 40 new 8th graders.
Yes.
And you're going to serve them for the full year.
Yes, potentially, right? Like, yes, potentially you could, in that case, there is a possibility to actually serve them if that's what the school wants.
Yeah, if that's what you decide on, or you're going to serve the same 80, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders across the year. But you can have 3 different series of or blocks of programming throughout the year, but it's the same kids being served.
Okay. It's for full year 25, of course.
Yes, exactly. Okay. But understanding that there'll be different 8th graders from year to year, but the same number and continuously served across the year.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yep. Yeah, of course. All right, we are at 3:15. Mark, anything in the chat that you think that I didn't get to that you can see? Otherwise, if you can put the email in the chat, or I can do that. Oh, I think, Margo, do you want to come off and make sure that you're reiterating from your understanding? And Margo is with DCPS.
You mean around this question of like, which kids are we working with?
Yeah, I see you in the chat, so I just wanted to give you the chance to.
Yeah, I mean, if your program is set up to serve 8th graders and deliver a special, pre-high school preparation for them, then you'll do 8th graders, a group of 8th graders in the first half a year, and then the next year you'll have different 8th graders. The 7th graders that move up to 8th grade will be your cohort. And then the following year, it's a different ones. And then it's the people who started as 6th graders when you first entered the school. So it doesn't have to be the same exact kids every year. Plus kids change schools all the time. It's just the idea is that your programming will stay consistent. So if you say it's for 8th graders, then we would expect it, I guess, to be 8th graders every year for the 3-year period.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Margo. I just want to make sure I saw you in the chat and I wanted to make sure you had a chance to share. And I appreciate, as I said, I kind of get tongue-tied with it as I attempt to clarify and want to make sure that you hear from different voices if it makes it a little better. Okay, well, it looks like we have answered all the questions that are asked. I am going to grab the email address and drop it in the chat real quick. So again, if additional questions come up, please email RFA OST24@dc.gov. We will respond up through next Wednesday and then publish them on Friday as late as Friday. There will be no questions and answers published after next Friday, November 10th. So get your questions in. You can access the Q&A from the Learn24 website. Learn24 is it. Make sure I have that correct too. I don't want to put the wrong email address, website in there. Learn24.dc.gov, right, team? Yeah, okay, great. There we go. And so check the website. That's where the Q&A is. That's where the RFA is. Send the questions that you have. We will post the recording and the PowerPoint from today so that you can return to it as needed. Oh, thank you, Mark. Mark has actually posted the actual website there. Okay. Thank
Shayna,
you, everyone.
real quick.
Yeah.
Real
Of course,
quick,
Alex.
make sure we're using RFA.OST24@dc.gov. It's a period in between RFA.
Oh, thank you. RFA.OST24@dc.gov. Thank you. It's so good to have the extra set of eyes. I appreciate that. Okay, so that's and I'll correct that in the slide before we get that posted. All right, all, good luck. Send me any questions you have. We'll get them answered, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and drop off. I think we're good.